Back when I was an art student, I strong-armed a scholarship kid into being my nude model. I had my way with him for 2 months of intense, passionate work, only to find out he was a long-lost trust fund baby. I freaked out, destroyed all the paintings overnight, and cut him loose. Years later, we came face to face at my gallery show. I kept my head down. "Adrien, good to see you." He just sneered. "What, you don't recognize me with my clothes on?" I never thought I'd see Adrien at my own art exhibition. He was in a tailored suit, looking sharp and respectable. A woman, just as elegantly dressed, was holding his arm. "This is just borderline porn masquerading as art," she said. "Especially this one. It feels like it was painted right after they did it. So trashy." The painting they were standing in front of was titled Shackles. On the canvas, a man with his face shrouded in black silk knelt on a bed of rose petals. His legs were parted, his head held high. He was completely naked, his hands bound tightly with rope. Adrien stared at the piece, his expression dark. I was hiding behind a nearby pillar, my heart pounding so hard I thought I was going to be sick. The woman next to him kept adding fuel to the fire. "I heard the artist is a woman. How shameless. Don't you think it's disgusting, too?" After a long moment, Adrien finally looked away. "Yeah, it's pretty disgusting." Vindicated, the woman looked smug. "I knew you wouldn't like it. No wonder this studio is about to go bankrupt. Instead of investing here, you should invest in my cousin. He graduated from the Royal College of Art in London. He's formally trained, way better than some self-taught hack." I didn't hear the rest. She led him away by the arm. Only when I was sure they were gone did I step out from behind the pillar. Suddenly, someone clapped me on the shoulder. "What are you doing standing over here?" It was my studio's manager, Michael. "I remember when the team was setting up, I specifically told you this piece wasn't for the exhibition. Why is it here?" Michael followed my gaze to the painting. A flicker of guilt crossed his face. "Really? I'm not sure, maybe the staff." Michael. Seeing he couldn't bluff his way out, he confessed. "Honestly, I never understood why you wouldn't show it. His face is covered, and the important parts are hidden by flowers. What are you so afraid of?" I didn't say anything, so he continued. "Do you have any idea how popular this painting is? More than half the people here came just to see it. Karina, I know you have your artistic principles, but I'm a businessman. I partnered with you because I saw your talent and your ambition. But for the past few years, all you've painted are landscapes and flowers. I admit your technique is flawless, but nobody's interested in that stuff anymore. Our studio is about to go bankrupt." I wasn't convinced. I also remember that a condition of our partnership was that you wouldn't interfere with my creative work. We stared at each other for a moment. Seeing I wouldn't back down, Michael threw his hands up. "Fine. I admit it was my call this time. It won't happen again, okay? What was done was done. Taking it down now would be pointless." I rubbed my temples, a headache forming. Michael slung an arm over my shoulder with a goofy grin. "Relax, relax. The show is a hit. I have a good feeling we're going to land a new investor from this." A few days later, just as he predicted, Michael called me. He said someone was willing to invest in our studio. But they have one condition. "What condition?" "He wants to buy Shackles." A sudden silence fell between us on the phone. Michael knew he was in the wrong. I explained to him that it's not for sale, but he's insisting. "What's the offer?" 48,000. Michael's voice lacked confidence. "The price isn't high, I know, but the investment is for 30 million. I don't get it, either. The guy isn't short on cash, so why such a lowball offer? Does he want it or not?" "Done." "What?" I said for 48,000, I'll do it. Sell it. After all, that price was exactly what I had paid Adrien all those years ago. That's right. The man in my painting was Adrien. The year I met him, I was an art student. I was getting ready for a national competition. Because of my past, I was struggling to break through in my figure painting. At my wit's end, I found Adrien. He had just graduated from high school. He was lean and tall, with a captivatingly jaded face that I found irresistible. At the time, he was cornered in an alley by debt collectors, covered in blood. In that instant, inspiration hit me like a tidal wave. So I offered to pay off his debts. $48,000. In exchange for 2 months of his time. During that period, I kept him locked away in my studio. At 19, his muscles were firm. His skin was pale, and you could see the fine hairs on his sexy, lean physique. When he tensed up, the veins in his arms would pop slightly. The beauty and power of the male form were on full display in his young body. To keep the tension I needed for my art, I would have to get him aroused and then immediately stop. "Karina, you're a fucking psycho." Yes, I knew. While painting Shackles, I had teased Adrien until he was on the verge of exploding. His eyes were red with frustration, but his hands were tied behind his back, leaving him completely helpless. With no other options, the man could only tilt his head back in humiliation, his Adam's apple bobbing. I spent 4 solid hours on that painting. By the end, his wrists were chafed raw from the ropes. That was also the first time he lost control. The moment I untied him, he lunged at me, kissing me fiercely. His breathing was heavy. "I'm going to kill you one of these days." He got his wish soon enough. His birth mother found him. That's when I learned he wasn't some unloved, pitiful boy. He was the long-lost true heir of a wealthy family. Adrien's life was turned upside down, and his mother, Ms. Daisy, found out about me. She had my competition eligibility revoked. She showed up with her lawyer and demanded I stop harming her son immediately, or she would sue. My son has a limitless future. I will not allow him to be ruined by you. Harming. I mulled over that word, and in the end, I gave in. In front of them, I destroyed all of my work. And I contacted Adrien to end our contract early. Unexpectedly, Adrien actually asked me, why? I found his question laughable. "I'm not satisfied with you anymore." "Really? I don't believe you. I get zero inspiration from you now. Besides, you're not short on cash anymore, are you, little master?" After that, Adrien left. But maybe it was karma. From that day on, my inspiration completely vanished. I couldn't even pick up a paintbrush without getting violently ill. Eventually, I could only paint things like flowers, birds, and fish. And that one painting I secretly kept, Shackles, became my only remaining portrait. The unexpected viral fame of Shackles reignited the spark in Michael that had been dormant for years. He urged me to get back in the game and cater to the market by painting some beefy guys. I brushed him off every time. On Monday, I had just arrived at the studio when 2 guys rushed up to me. They were wearing tank tops, their chests so massive they could probably crush my head between them. They saw me and called out warmly, "Hey, boss." I jumped, startled. Michael was beaming. "I found you some new models to help you find your inspiration. Go on, take your shirts off, show your boss those muscles." Before I could say a word, a cool voice cut in from behind me. I've heard artists lead colorful lives. Today has certainly been an eye-opener. Hearing the voice, Michael turned around first, his face immediately breaking into an ass-kissing grin. "Adrien, you're here. Karina, this is the investor I was telling you about, Adrien. Adrien, this is our studio's artist, Ms. Karina. The painting you wanted to buy was her creation." I hadn't realized Michael and Adrien had scheduled a meeting for today. It was too late to escape. I lowered my eyes. "Hello, Adrien." Adrien glanced at me and snorted. "What, you don't recognize me with my clothes on?" My face went pale. I didn't respond. Michael, however, didn't quite catch it and asked, "What was that?" Adrien didn't repeat himself. He got straight to the point. About the investment, I need to reconsider. Michael panicked. But we agreed on the phone the other day. Do you have some concerns? I don't have any concerns. My girlfriend doesn't approve. She thinks it sends the wrong message. He stared right at me. She thinks your line of work is unclean. Dirty minds see dirt everywhere. Perhaps. In any case, I can't convince her. But Miss Karina seems to have a way with words. Maybe you could help me persuade her? We faced off, and I was the first to look away. Your girlfriend isn't wrong. We are pretty unclean. With that, I glanced at the muscular guys who had become part of the scenery. Didn't I tell you to take your shirts off? Why are you still wearing them? The two men stood there awkwardly, looking to Michael for direction. Michael quickly tried to smooth things over. Adrien, it's a misunderstanding. This is just for finding inspiration. And to be honest, Karina is my girlfriend. He threw an arm around my shoulders, his smile fake. We started the studio together. A couple's business, you know. If your girlfriend is still worried, maybe I could explain things to her in person. The silence in the room was deafening. Adrien's gaze was locked on the hand Michael had on my shoulder. After a long moment, he let out a sneer. Invite her over? Who do you think you are? You think you can meet my people whenever you want? Even the normally smooth-talking Michael was momentarily stunned by that. He then forced a laugh. Right, my mistake. Our studio has other works. If the investment is an issue, we could always look at other types of collaboration. It wasn't until he had respectfully shown Adrien out that Michael irritably loosened his tie. Doing business with these rich kids is exhausting. They're all a bunch of sly foxes. If it wasn't for the money, who would put up with this crap? I suddenly remembered Adrien, years ago, lying before me, his eyes full of humiliation as I positioned him. I couldn't help but think about how the tables have turned. Give it up, Michael. His girlfriend's cousin is in the same business. Graduated from some Royal Academy in the UK. Way more promising than a studio like ours. But as soon as I said that, Michael got defensive. Says who? We're getting a lot of recognition now, you know. A film company just contacted me today. They love your art style and want you to be the lead character designer for an animated feature. It's a huge opportunity. I was thinking of accepting it for you. No wonder Michael was suddenly in such a rush to find me inspiration. Seeing my hesitation, Michael tried to persuade me. Your problem is that your moral compass is too rigid. You've boxed yourself in. I recently found a great spot. I'll take you there tonight to broaden your horizons. Once you open up your perspective, the inspiration will flow. Our studio had been treading water for years. Now, by a strange twist of fate, we had the chance to work on a film production. It was a new path for us. After some thought, I agreed. However, that evening when he led me into a bar, pushed open the door to a private room, and a line of young men in uniforms bowed 90 degrees and chanted the classic welcome, boss, I instantly regretted it. I should have known Michael wouldn't have any respectable ideas. Michael really went all out. He ordered 5 or 6 pretty boys at once. They were in front of me, shaking their hips and strutting around. I finally couldn't take it anymore and escaped, claiming I had to use the restroom. Just as I pushed the door open, I ran right into Adrien, who was standing in the hallway. A cigarette dangled from his lips as he frowned at his phone. He clearly hadn't expected to see me here. He froze for a second, then his eyes instinctively darted toward my private room. Inside, the party was in full swing. A few of the young men were jumping around to the music like monkeys on meth. I could visibly see Adrien's face darken. I didn't think I had anything to say to him. I gave a curt nod and tried to walk past him. Suddenly, he grabbed my arm. Adrien was still holding his phone in his other hand, but his expression was clearly impatient. So Bella's cousin needs an investment. What's that got to do with me? You can't possibly think that just because you set me up on one blind date with her, I'm actually going to be with her, do you? I didn't want to get tangled up with him and twisted my wrist, trying to break free. He felt my movement and tightened his grip. He then strode over and pushed open the door to an empty private room on the other side. He locked the door behind us, pinning me against it. A blind date like that was the first and last time. From now on, I won't play along with any of your little shows. He hung up the phone. Looking down at me, he asked, "What are you doing here? Did that so-called boyfriend of yours bring you? Who brought me here is none of your business. First, it's checking out pecs, now it's clubbing. Karina, you'll really do anything for inspiration, won't you?" Since he didn't mind bringing up the past, I dropped the pretense. "You've known what kind of person I am from the beginning, haven't you? Otherwise, why would I have sought you out back then? Then keep coming after me." I thought I'd misheard him. "What? Didn't you say I was your muse? Your Greek god? Since you need inspiration so badly, I'll give you a chance today. You can keep painting me." I couldn't help but laugh. "All right." I crossed my arms and raised an eyebrow at him. "You know the rules. Get naked. Show me what you've got. You think I'm joking?" The man sneered, his long fingers moving to the buttons of his shirt. 1, 2. He shrugged the shirt off. A sculpted, broad chest was completely exposed before me. The loud music from outside pulsed through the room, and colorful lights refracted through the translucent glass. The lights inside our room were off, casting shadows across Adrien's face. Every frame looked impossibly perfect. He didn't stop. His hand went to his black belt. Click. The buckle sprang open. My brain went blank. Blood roared through my veins. My mind, which had been empty for 7 years, was suddenly flooded with images. Every single thought was a fatal temptation. I never thought he'd actually go through with it. My expression hardened. "That's enough." "It's not enough." He wouldn't let me retreat. His large hand seized mine. His distinct knuckles slid between my fingers, lacing with them. He raised our joined hands above my head, pressing me against the door. My adrenaline shot through the roof. On the verge of losing control, I shoved Adrien away and bolted out of the room. It wasn't until the cool night air hit me that my racing heart finally began to slow down. I sent Michael a quick text and went straight back to the studio. I flipped open my sketchbook, grabbed a pencil, and began to draw frantically. When I finally came to my senses, a solid chest was already rendered on the paper. The buttons of a white shirt were straining, about to pop. The collarbones were exquisite, and the arm pressed against the wall showed the faint outline of bulging veins. I pressed my throbbing temples. Years of therapy, and it turns out all I needed was for him to take off his shirt. How ironic. The next day, I was woken up by a knock on the door. Opening my eyes, I realized I had no idea what time I'd stopped drawing last night, but I had fallen asleep right there in the studio. I opened the door, and there stood the man from my drawing, along with Michael. I was completely stunned. Michael shot me a look, mouthing something. "Adrien is still here to talk about the investment. He said he had some requirements he wanted to discuss with you. You weren't answering your phone, so I figured you'd be at the studio and brought him over." Adrien looked at me and curved his lips into a smile. "Long time no see, Ms. Karina." Adrien came to the studio first thing in the morning. He raised the investment amount to 50 million. "Adrien is a great admirer of your style. He just hopes that during our collaboration, you could produce a portrait of him." Before he could finish, I cut him off. "Impossible." Michael stopped mid-sentence, looking at me with disbelief. Maybe I didn't explain it clearly. "What I mean is..." "I heard you." I said, "Impossible." Michael was left speechless. Adrien laughed and turned to Michael. "Can I talk to her alone for a minute?" "Of course." "No." Michael ran a hand through his hair and explained to Adrien, "She's usually very sweet. She might just be grumpy from waking up. You two talk, I'll wait outside. Just give me a shout if you need anything." He shot me a glare and mouthed the words, "Be nice." The door closed. The familiar space suddenly felt alien with this unwelcome guest inside. "So, why won't you agree? I'm afraid your girlfriend might get the wrong idea. After all, we're not very clean around here." He laughed. "Don't worry, I'm still single. I just said that the other day on purpose. Bella was just a blind date my family forced on me. I happened to know you were at the exhibition, so I came specifically. I admit I was trying to provoke you, but I can promise you I will have nothing more to do with her. So, besides that, are there any other reasons?" His explanation left me stunned. When I processed it, I realized something was off. I'm not his anything. Why was he explaining all this to me? So I hardened my heart. "I've already told you the reason. I have no inspiration from you anymore. Looking at you makes me sick. I can't paint you." "Really?" He walked past me to the easel. "Then tell me, what is this?" My face went pale. I had completely forgotten that my unfinished drawing was still sitting on the desk. My all-night sketch was now irrefutable evidence. I was at a loss for words. That's not. You never forgot me at all." As if he'd been handed a get-out-of-jail-free card, he suddenly strode toward me. His tone was triumphant. "I heard you haven't painted a portrait in 7 years. Admit it. Only I can satisfy your imagination. All those dark, damp, sunless fantasies. Karina, we were made for each other." My heart pounded, my breathing ragged. Adrien pressed closer, leaving me no room to argue. "So what?" I exhaled sharply. "Adrien, whatever we had ended 7 years ago. I won't agree to your terms, and I don't want to have anything to do with you ever again. You've already bought back the last painting from that time. Let the past stay in the past. You may have moved past it, but I can't." Adrien's eyes were tinged with red. "You trapped me in that studio back then. How could you just leave me behind and walk away? Karina, don't even think about running. You can't escape." Michael came in after Adrien had left. He saw the drawing on the easel and froze. "Did you know Adrien before this?" Michael's mind worked fast. "The reason you couldn't paint people, it was because of him, wasn't it?" When I didn't deny it, Michael slapped his forehead. "I should have known something was up between you two. You're not the type to be so difficult." He sat down next to me. "So, what happened?" The memories had been deliberately buried for so long. Talking about them now felt like speaking of another lifetime. There wasn't much to it, really. Just the story of two broken, twisted souls who lost control during one dark, humid summer. Adrien's adoptive father was an alcoholic. The year I met him, his father had gambled away all the family's assets. He abandoned Adrien and skipped town. 19-year-old Adrien had just finished his college entrance exams. Instead of the joy of graduation, he was faced with a mountain of debt, the fear of abandonment, and an uncertain future. He was homeless. And that same year, my parents divorced. My sanctimonious professor father had an affair with an 18-year-old student. My mother grew to hate art because of it. She hid my paintbrushes and forced me to change my major. Furious, I ran away from home. For me, that competition was the last straw I was clinging to, my only hope of holding on to my dream. Unfortunately, Adrien left. I was disqualified from the competition. She even went to my university and pressured them to expel me. I ran around everywhere, begging for help. At 21, my life fell apart. "Actually, there's something I never told you," I finished. Michael was silent for a long time. Then he said, 5 years ago, when we started this studio together, the very first painting you sold, Adrien bought it. What? Michael pressed his lips together. And after that, almost every month, he sent someone to buy your work. It never stopped for 5 years. I was stunned. How did I not know this? I always thought he was just one of our big clients. How was I supposed to know you were involved with someone like him? Michael rubbed his temples. I'm starting to think, maybe Adrien didn't know what really happened back then either. Karina, not everyone is like your father. Running away won't solve anything. Maybe you should find a chance to really talk to him. I had never imagined that Adrien had been watching over me all these years. Why? Shouldn't he hate my guts? Dealing with people has always been my weak spot. After that day, I hid in the background, trying to avoid Adrien. But a few days later, a woman found me. She took off her sunglasses and smiled at me. Karina. We meet again. She hadn't changed at all. Just as polished. Just as fake. She took me to a nearby coffee shop. Before we went in, I made an excuse to step aside and quickly dialed a number. Only after I was sure the call connected did I go back inside. Why were you looking for me? It's been a long time. Just wanted to catch up. I scoffed at her words. I don't think I have anything to catch up on with the person who forced me out of a competition, destroyed my education, and made it impossible for me to even pick up a paintbrush for 2 years. You're right. I'm surprised to be seeing you again myself. She laughed, but her eyes turned sharp. So, was the lesson you learned back then not harsh enough? Is that why you have the courage to get tangled up with Adrien again? She had found out about my recent interactions with Adrien. If that's why you're here, then you're talking to the wrong person. I suggest you take it up with your son directly. What do you think? I placed my phone on the table and put it on speaker. Adrien, you heard your mother, didn't you? Whatever you have to say, sort it out between yourselves. I'm an outsider, and I won't get involved in your family drama. Also, don't contact me again. I wouldn't want your mother to get the wrong idea. I hung up, blocked Adrien's number, and turned to her with a serious expression. 7 years ago, I was young and had things to lose, so I was powerless against you. But I have nothing to be afraid of now. I advise you to leave me alone. My life isn't worth much anyway. We can settle old scores and new ones together. If it comes down to it, we can just take each other down. The next morning, Michael sent me a text. He said Adrien had signed the investment contract. 50 million. No strings attached. He only asked him to pass on one message to me. I'm sorry. After that day, Adrien disappeared. On Michael's advice, I ended up taking the animation job. But progress was terrible. The burst of inspiration I'd felt when Adrien reappeared was like a final flare of life before death. It was completely extinguished the moment he left. The deadline was approaching, and my anxiety was at its peak. It was right at that moment that I got called out online. It started when an influencer reposted my old painting, Shackles. The post insinuated that I had a messy private life and used the casting couch with my male models. The influencer had a lot of followers. And since the painting had already gone viral a while back, the post blew up almost instantly. I knew being a female model was risky, but now male models have to worry too. This guy looks really young, he might not even be an adult. I hope they investigate this. Is there no standard for being an artist anymore? Any Tom, Dick, or Harry can open a gallery and call themselves a painter. Boycott this. My first thought was that she was behind it. But then I reconsidered. She cared so much about her reputation, she would never allow her son to be discussed like this. Michael had someone look into the influencer's identity and got back to me that evening. The guy's name is Ken. He's also an artist, studied in the UK. It's weird. Why would some random guy we've never met target us? Studied in the UK. An artist. A name suddenly clicked in my head. Bella? Michael had never actually heard the name before. I explained, I told you before. The girlfriend Adrien was with? Her cousin also runs an art studio. Michael's expression became complicated. He's really your kryptonite, isn't he? It feels like bad luck just follows you whenever he's around. While complaining, Michael glanced at his phone and suddenly gasped. Karina, Adrien just responded himself. What? Michael handed me his phone. I looked at the screen. Sure enough, the top post was from Adrien. Adrien, the person in the painting is me. It was completely consensual. Underneath, he had attached a photo of himself standing next to Shackles. In less than half an hour. The post already had over 100,000 shares. The comments were all variations of the same thing. A stream of holy shit. As if that wasn't enough, Adrien immediately posted again. Not only was I willing back then, I'm still willing now. The picture was the sketch I had drawn, the one he must have secretly photographed at my studio that day. I only had one thought in my head. He's lost his mind. The discussion raged on into the night, with hashtags like Adrien exposed and Adrien the art model trending. The buzz drove tons of traffic to our studio's page. Many people flooded the comments, saying how they envied me and my good taste. Others were desperately asking who I was. How on earth did I manage to get a titan like Adrien to pose for me? This sudden flood of fame left Michael grinning from ear to ear. I take back what I said before. He's not your kryptonite. He's our studio's mascot, our good luck charm. But when I got home that night, I found the good luck charm himself curled up in a ball, squatting by my front door. Hearing my footsteps, he looked up. Karina, are you really done with me? The rundown hallway, the piles of clutter. It felt like I was instantly transported back 7 years. I stopped in my tracks, not moving forward. He seemed to guess that I wouldn't engage, so he just started explaining. Bella is Ms. Daisy's daughter. She has nothing to do with me. I couldn't quite process that. Isn't she the blind date your mom set you up with? She is. Because I'm not Ms. Daisy's son. This time, I was completely frozen. Adrien had only found out after he was taken back into the family. It turned out he was the illegitimate son of his biological father and their maid. Ms. Daisy couldn't stand him, so she first fired the maid and then abandoned him shortly after he was born. Years later, Ms. Daisy's own son passed away. To fight for the inheritance, she remembered the cheap son she had discarded. It would have been fine if Adrien was an obedient waste of space. But he had become increasingly prominent over the years, and Ms. Daisy felt threatened. So she schemed to introduce her own illegitimate daughter to him, to make him truly one of her people. Back then, Ms. Daisy told me you took a pile of her money and dumped me without a second thought. I didn't believe it. I came looking for you. And then, I saw with my own eyes that you had torn up every single piece of art related to me. At that moment, all I could think was how sweet you were when you were convincing me to be your model, promising me the stars. But when you turned on me, how could you be so cruel? Karina, you were in pain, and so was I. Only I know how I got through these past 7 years. I didn't want to find you. I thought it was better for me to just rot alone. But you kept one painting of me, and that gave me hope again. He looked at me, his eyes moist. Now I'll ask you one last question. If I lose everything all over again, would you still take me in? I should have said no. But the corners of the man's eyes in front of me were red. He stood there like a crumpled piece of paper. Almost uncontrollably. The inspiration that had been blocked for so long came pouring out. A crazy idea rushed into my mind. You know I don't support freeloaders. I took the small dog leash from the table and looped it around his neck. Adrien, if you're staying here, you're not allowed to cry. Adrien's public scandal was an open declaration of war against Miss Daisy. The family drama was laid bare, dominating news headlines. Everyone thought Adrien's actions were suicidal, like an egg smashing against a rock. Even Miss Daisy herself thought so. She gave him an ultimatum. Either come back and marry Bella. And be a good little rich boy. Or leave for good. She would make his life a living hell. Adrien didn't even bother to reply to the threat. He moved in with me, diligently fulfilling the collaboration we should have finished 7 years ago. It felt like nothing had changed. The only difference was, this time, I didn't have to tease him. The man's gaze, simply fixed on me, was enough to keep him hard all night. It turned out that Adrien really did have a magical, almost mystical effect on me. With him around, my work on the animation project went incredibly smoothly. I finished all the line art before the deadline. That day, I slept like the dead. When I finally woke up, I had no idea what day or year it was. Adrien wasn't in the room. I grabbed my phone and saw a string of question marks from Michael, sent 2 hours ago. Have you lost your mind? Michael replied instantly. I think Adrien has lost his mind. He sent me a picture of himself sleeping this morning. Holy crap, don't tell me he's into me. I clicked on the screenshot of the chat Michael sent. It was indeed a photo Adrien had taken of himself. The image was very blurry, you could only make out that someone was sleeping under a blanket. I was silent for a moment. Maybe he just wanted you to see the surroundings? The surroundings you're talking about, that's a bed. So he's suggesting we go to? Is it possible he was trying to hint that this is my house? The other end went quiet. Then a series of exclamation points appeared. You two slept together? You work fast. Wait, why are you sending me a pic of you two sleeping together? A thought occurred to me and I couldn't help but shake my head. I guess it's because he thought I was your girlfriend. Michael didn't say a word. He just sent me a huge sun emoji. The day I handed in my work, I ran into Bella. I hadn't known her identity before. But looking at her now, she really did have a striking resemblance to Miss Daisy. They both seemed equally annoying. I was about to walk around her when she suddenly came towards me. Do you have any idea that because of you, Adrien and his mother had a huge fight? Adrien was basically adopted. Doing this could get him kicked out of the family. I frowned at her words and asked her a question. Jessica's dad got arrested last month for getting into a fight with a dog. Do you know what to do about it? The other girl was stunned. Who's Jessica? What does her dad getting arrested have to do with me? I sneered, exactly. So why is Adrien fighting with his mom any of my damn business? Bella's face changed when she realized what I was saying. Don't think I don't know what people like you are after. It's all about money, isn't it? Do you really think Adrien likes you? He's just playing with you. When it really comes down to a conflict of interest, you'll see who he chooses. You've got it all wrong, little sister. I chuckled. I'm not in it for the money. I'm just after his body. Who he plays with, and how he wants to play, is none of my concern. Bella didn't expect me to be so blunt. Her wide eyes were filled with shock. Suddenly, a voice came from the side. Are you done yet? It was Adrien, who had gotten tired of waiting and came out of the car. Seeing Adrien, Bella immediately rushed over to him. Adrien, you've been tricked. She doesn't really care about you, she's just after your body. Oh. So you're just jealous that my body is good enough to be lusted after? After a long moment, the girl's eyes started to well up with tears, and she choked out, You're both insane. I never asked Adrien how he planned to handle the situation with his mother. Adrien, probably worried that Miss Daisy would affect my mood, never brought it up either. 2 months later, Michael told me that Miss Daisy had been arrested. It's not public yet, but it's all over the industry grapevine. One of their financial executives, a guy named Bai, was implicated too. I heard he was also her lover. Seeing my silence, Michael sounded uncertain. Don't tell me you didn't know? You've been with Adrien all this time, and he didn't tell you anything? I really didn't know. That meddler Michael started giving me more of his terrible advice. Just between us, Adrien hasn't been relying on the Dai family for years. He has several of his own successful companies. Now that Ms. Daisy is in jail and his dad is dead, he's the sole heir. The family fortune can only go to him. Don't get mad at me for saying this, but it's obvious he's just playing around with you right now, so don't get too attached. But remember one thing, don't be stubborn. Take every advantage you can get. He invested 50 million in us before, right? This time, hit him up for 100 million. As if. 100 million. What kind of studio needs that much money? As Michael was saying all this, Adrien was standing in the kitchen wearing an apron, cooking. The phone call ended, and he glanced up. He asked nonchalantly, "Who was that?" "You were on the phone for a while." "Michael." Hearing the name, Adrien pouted. He was clearly not happy. I walked over and popped a grape he had just washed into my mouth. "I heard Ms. Daisy got arrested." Adrien grunted in acknowledgement. "The financial fraud involves too much money. She's not getting out in this lifetime." "So, when are you planning on moving out?" The hand stirring the pan froze. "What did you say?" "I've finished all the paintings, and all the work has been submitted. Now that Ms. Daisy is no longer a threat and your fortune is still yours, there's no need to crash at my place anymore, right? Are you dumping me?" "I prefer to call it ending our professional relationship." "Did Michael say something to you? Is he jealous?" "What does Michael have to do with anything?" "I don't get it. You've had a taste of a delicacy like me, how can you even look at a plain dish like him? Can he give you inspiration? He's just a loser who takes you to bars to look for men. Why are you so devoted to him?" "I'm not leaving." "Why should I be the one to leave? He's been with you for 5 years, but I've been with you for 5 years too. I've been here since the day the studio was founded, you just didn't notice me. You can't blame me for your mistake of not noticing me. And you can't pin Ms. Daisy's crimes on me. That's not fair." With that, he threw down the spatula and stormed back into the bedroom. Did I even say anything during all that? Why is he the one who's mad? I sighed and followed him in. Adrien was lying on the bed, his back to the door. The ridiculous apron he was still wearing undercut his dramatic exit. I leaned against the wall. "I'm only going to say this once." Adrien's body didn't move. "Michael is my distant cousin. And he's gay." The person on the bed shot up. He looked at me with wide, shocked eyes. "The lease on this place is up. I'm not renewing. If you're going to move, you'd better find a place soon. Preferably one with a separate studio. I'm sick of this tiny room. Oh, and by the way, stop sending photos to Michael. He's starting to think you're in love with him." 2 years later. A piece titled "Out of Control" went viral online. The canvas depicted a man's profile. The sleeves of his black shirt were rolled up, revealing the smooth lines of veins on his forearm. The man was tightly clutching a woman's hand. His gaze was sorrowful and restrained. The front buttons of his shirt were pulled open, revealing a solid chest underneath. The internet absolutely exploded. "Damn, the vibe of this painting is incredible. Total sad puppy dog look. Tears really are a man's best lingerie. The sexual tension is off the charts. Is that your man? Why is he wearing clothes? Are you treating us like strangers now, sis?" And at that moment, I was standing in front of this very painting. Next to me stood the star of the piece, Adrien. He looked up at the painting, his expression just as serious as it was all those years ago. I thought he might be upset, so I asked. "Does it bother you? Having your body displayed for the public?" He slowly shook his head. Then he asked me. "Out of control. Is that how you define our relationship?" I hadn't expected him to ask that. "Thinking about all our struggles and drama," I said. "I guess so." He thought about it seriously for a moment, then asked another question. "If I were to propose to you right now, would that feel even more out of control?" With just one sentence, my heart began to beat erratically again. He squeezed my hand and started leading me toward the exit. Michael saw us leaving and frantically called out. The interview is about to start. Where are you two going? To get married. Oh, okay. Just hurry back. 2 seconds later, a much louder shout echoed through the gallery. Wait, you're going to do what? Adrien pulled me along, and we started moving faster, eventually breaking into a run. This moment felt so much like that day 7 years ago in the alley, when I grabbed Adrien's hand. And we ran together toward an unknown future.